our visitors, we would like to say good morning to you as well and welcome to Shorter College. I'll be bringing you a brief biography on Richard Allen. For those of you who do not know, Richard Allen is the founder of the A.M.E. Church, which this school comes from. Richard Allen was born on Valentine's Day of 1760 as a slave. It was believed to be in Philadelphia, but some say Delaware, so that's still up in the air for discussion. His original owner was Benjamin Chew, but he would later be sold to Stokely Strugus in 1768. At the age of 17, Richard would convert to Methodist at the expense of a white man's sermon. He heard the white man preach against slavery, and that motivated him and wanted him to accept the word. Soon after, his owner would also convert to this train of thought. As he converted and studied with everyone in the Methodist Church, his owner decided, you know what, I'll allow you to buy your freedom for $2,000. By 1783, Richard Allen had purchased his own freedom and become a free man. Of course, his mother and siblings had been sold off in the time, so he was on his own at this particular moment. He would return to Philadelphia, which is where he adopted the last name Allen. Prior to this, he was known as Negro Richard, as most would at that time be called Negro than your first name. He would soon join St. George's Methodist Episcopal Church, where he was an assistant minister, and he would conduct prayer meetings for the blacks of the church. At this church, there were whites and blacks. They worshiped together, did everything together, but sit together. The church was still segregated through the pews. And there were other limitations that the blacks did not like. So Richard Allen, along with the Reverend Absalom Jones, decided, you know what, we'll create our own church. And they went and created the Free African Society, which was a non-denominational religious mutual aid society dedicated to helping the community. That would eventually spawn on to become Bethel Church, which was founded in a blacksmith shop, because at that time, majority of the things we had to do had to have been done in secret or with some form of veil. Eventually, the church would adopt the name Mother Bethel because it would become the first of many African Methodist Episcopal churches throughout the country and the world. Mother Bethel was also important to the Underground Railroad because it was a major stop. In 1799, Richard Allen became the first ordained minister of the Methodist Episcopal Church. 1816, with his support from other representatives from the black Methodist churches, he would go on to create the first national black church in the United States, as well become the first bishop. Not only did he understand the importance of religion to our people, but he also understood the power of an economic boycott. So he would go on to form the Free Produce Society, where members only could come in and purchase. They purchased the products from non-slave labor in 1830. So it was set up so that we would go and buy things that were produced without the slaves' hands actually being on it. So it wasn't as if we were contributing to slavery itself. Richard Allen would go on to live a life with his second wife, Sarah Allen, who would become the mother of the A.M.E. Church. He died March 26, 1831, at his home on Spruce Street in Philadelphia. And for those of you all who are interested in more information on Richard Allen, there are several A.M.E. churches around the area. We have one right down the street here, Bethel North Little Rock African Methodist Episcopal Church, and you have plenty. You can go in, Google, and it'll pull up all of the churches. And I would suggest to everybody, take a little time out and go and just check those out, because that is a product of one of our own during a time where we didn't have anything. And it has outlasted the times, the changes, everything. It has been at the soul of a lot of demonstrations, all because of Richard Allen.
So he was recognized, he was noted as one of A.M.E magazine's top 30 on the rise in America. He was also featured in A.Y magazine's Powerful Men 2015. Representative Armstrong is married to Cheryl, and they have a son who is Drake. The family attends First Baptist Church in North Little Rock and resides in the Argenta community. So he resides right where he is working. The next person that comes before us, let's give him a hand. Representative A.M.E Armstrong. We are happy to have him today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, and I might add, he's a good friend to my youngest son. Love that. Love
That's
that.
my buddy. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for having me, Reverend Williams. Thank you for the kind introduction. On behalf of my mother, who is a Shorter alum, Jackie Armstrong, and my baby boy, Edison Drake Armstrong, and my wife, Shara, who could not be here today, I just stand before you with a full heart and a humble spirit. What I was just able to witness from the young man telling the story of Bishop Allen and the young lady's performance in the song that highlights what is really important in these times about us not forgetting who paid it all, who gave us a chance to wake up this morning, to have food on our tables. In spite of our ailments or our conditions or situations, somebody paid it all before us, and it was a lot more than what we oftentimes pay today. And so I am just extremely humble and grateful for this opportunity to serve before you. I won't be here long. Gentlemen, thank you very much for the kind background music. It's a blessing to have that. But my spirit is full, and I just simply wanted to stop by today to talk with you for a while, but really hear from you. Oftentimes in politics, or politicians, we should say, have a lot to say. Some of them never turn a chance down to get in a microphone and talk. And my intentions today are really to listen. I am in a very unique position, and before I go into that, I would like to offer special thanks. It would be appropriate to offer special thanks to President Green and the entire Shorter College Board of Trustees for their enduring support. When I stepped into office in 2012 until now, they have been very supportive and uplifting their own in their community. Miss Yolanda, to see her zeal and zest, and remember my first speech here when I first took office in 2012, and to just watch how much Shorter has grown and continues to grow. I think you all have a jewel in her, and your faculty and staff, and of course the students. I thank you for, without you giving me the opportunity and the platform to be able to stand before you and speak, no one would know my voice or really know who I was. So I thank you. That does not come to me lightly whenever I'm invited to speak. This afternoon's message is simple, but important enough to know that it will be short. I don't want people to go to sleep, and I remember once being a student and having to listen to people just talk at you. And so again, my aim and intention this afternoon is to deliver a message, to highlight some points, to stop my message, to listen to you all, ask your questions, give your comments, engage me in a way in which we can have a dialogue and not a lecture. And then last but not least, if you would allow me on my way out to pray with you. This is fitting, this is chapel. I am a praying soul, and that has carried me from whence I've come to where I am now. So if that's okay with you, if you nod your head, then that lets me know I got some crowd participation. Everybody okay with that? Okay, excellent. Excellent. A lot of times I feel like you get to speak and you have to bear so much of yourself, especially when speaking to young people, in order for them to connect with you. And so today I made up my mind this morning as I was preparing my notes very early with Edison pouring coffee all over me. And I said, I'm just going to try my best to deliver the message in which you've given me, God, and then listen to what my constituents, whether you live in my district or not, which is comprised of everything south of Interstate 40, bookend by I-430 and I-440, and it goes out to southeast Jacksonville, covering a proportion of Galloway, Dick Jeter, Valentine Road. So you'll know the parameters in which I represent. And whether you live in Little Rock or North Little Rock or in my district, it is a part of my duty to oftentimes listen to what my constituents have to say. The subject of my message today, and then we'll get into some feedback and conversation, is persistence to keep rising. I am in my last term in office. Again, I repeat, persistence to keep rising. If you have a pen or a piece of paper, I'm a church boy, and my pastor always says, you know, I'm going to give you a scripture, but here's my subject today, and I'm going to give you some text too, and particularly from the book of Matthew. So the persistence to keep rising. I'm serving in my last term in office. I've been at this for 6 years, but more importantly, I've been doing this type of work since I was 14. I was mentored by the likes of Tracy Steele and former governors and former people that made governors, Curtis Sykes and others in this community had a real strong hold in my life. A.M.E. Marshall and the Marshall family raised me, and they taught many kids at then Jones High School. But I share with you that as I am leaving this stop on my journey, it is important that I make certain to keep a binding log to share with those coming after me. Maybe someone in this room will someday stand at this podium as a state representative, a state senator, a city councilwoman, a school board member, and it is important that you have a chronological log of things as they happen in our society. That wasn't per se always done for me, but I feel it important whomever is the next state representative have that information. My staffer is with me today, Mr. Darius Walton, to take these notes. I've sat down with all of the bishops and reverends of the A.M.E. Family here recently, and I heard the agenda of the A.M.E. Church, and I took those notes profusely. I sat down with several people throughout North Little Rock representing every community from Rose City to Glenview, all the way over to Pike and off Pike, in which where I grew up. And I've just tried to take a journal, a log, to pass along to whomever is next to know these are the issues, this is what's on the people's minds. So when we get into our dialogue feedback, I would like to hear some of that and make certain that we're taking those notes. But the persistence to keep rising, given the history in HBCUs across this great country, if we fail, I think oftentimes my pastor says, remember not to forget. But if we fail to forget the times in which we once came from, when Mr. Allen was up against tremendous odds in the 1800s, and the A.M.E. Church decided that they wanted a particular type of education for people that looked like us in our culture because it was sufficient to our gains in today's society. And I think about, man, look how far we have come. Because of the A.M.E. Church, because of people like Mr. Allen, we are provided an opportunity to have a wonderful place to have chapel. A wonderful campus in which, if you look around at the revitalization and the building of the 12th district office, amazing from whence we have come. But if you fail to remember the times in which we've come from, I am here to guarantee you, ladies and gentlemen, that we are destined to repeat our past. History is a place marker oftentimes given to us in order for us to try and navigate at a different path. You go down one mountain, you enter a valley, you come up another mountain, and never will you enter the next mountain the same way you came down and went up the first one. And so I implore upon you today to make certain that you try your best, as this young man so best put it, to look into things like Bishop Allen, to visit some of the landmarks in which the A.M.E. Church and this community here in the Shorter College area, Shorter Garden area, created for our people to have an opportunity to mix amongst themselves, to educate ourselves, to be ready and prepared when we enter the larger spectrum of society. Do not, ladies and gentlemen, forget from whence we have come. Again, persistence to keep rising is the message today. If we forget that, we will stifle our opportunities to continue to rise in these times. No longer is the day, as we see by the shape of our new political leaders, regardless of their political party, regardless of what they choose to do and say. Now social media demands a lot of time and attention, so that drowns out the reality of real news, young man. And real news is what I feel you get from your own community. You know, as they say, I'm not shy from the streets, I grew up in them. You know, the streets talking. You can always typically find out something you need to know in the streets, and especially in our communities. And that may not leave our communities as our parents once raised us, what goes on in this house. All right, so what goes on in the streets amongst our own people typically what? Stays with us. And I think the environment in which we have with the Shorter College community, and the environment in which I know that President Green and Reverend Williams and others in the board of trustees at this institution are focused on, and our ancestors focused so strongly on when they created Hampton University and Howard University and Jackson State and Tennessee State and Tougaloo. All these institutions were created, ladies and gentlemen, to create our own society within society, to raise up our kings and queens so that we could have our own and not have to be subject to identifying or understanding it in a different way. Now, I was blessed to attend the University of Arkansas, and I was told a few things before I went to Fayetteville, and I survived. And not only did I survive, God propelled me in a way in which I became the second African American ever elected at a majority white institution in our state. I say that to say, being able to come back to North Little Rock and truly serve my people, our people at a grassroots level has taught me a lot. It has grounded me in a way in which I understand that our struggle is always ongoing and real, but it is winnable, it is attainable, it is overcomable, if that is even a word. We can prevail upon the things that have been placed in front of us because of simply the backbone and infrastructure of things like the A.M.E. Church and black colleges across our country. Our HBCUs, this college I feel like gave my mother at a time when I was graduating high school in 1997, a place where she could be herself. A single mom raising 2 kids. Sometimes the water would be off, sometimes the light would be off, but we're gonna go to church. She was gonna attend class at Shorter College, and we were gonna go to school. And as I crossed the stage in 1997 and my mom crossed the stage finishing up her degree in paralegal here at Shorter College, it was a huge milestone in our family. And as I look back on that, to remember not to forget, I can't help but to say, once again, that we are in times in which persistence is the keeping us rising. Persistence, ladies and gentlemen, just so happens to be one of the strongest and powerful tools we all have. As a generation and generations that have come before us, those that came before us, stop persisting. Today, I implore you all to please not stop persisting. This campus will allow you chances to develop and engage in intellectual thought, to expand your reading, your writing, your culture, your understandings of the world. And I just encourage you to adapt and assimilate to that in a way in which you can carry it forward so that you can continue to rise. I started very meager, off pike, straight F's on my report card in the 3rd grade, a chance to drop out of school, a chance to have a child out of wedlock when I was 14 during the height of the 90s when Arkansas led the country in these epidemics. But the persistence of my mother and the persistence of this community to keep plugging into me and now plugging into you to keep rising lets me know that we all have an opportunity, ladies and gentlemen. We all have a shot to keep rising. In the book of Matthew, 13th chapter, 24 through 30th verse, there's a story, a parable there about the wheat and the tare. And I mentioned things about our political leaders and the fact that it's hard to really discern who's telling what and what sounds real and who's really here to help you or who's really here just to talk and ask for money or vote at your church on Sunday when you may not see them any other time of the year. The wheat and the tare. The rain and the sun. Heartache, deaths, light bill due, cancer, hard times. My dad used to beat my mom. I never thought I'd be able to forgive him for that. He was on drugs at a point in time in his life, and I never thought I could adjust to being able to look at him face to face as a man because I didn't see him as a man at the time. But God changed my heart. And he allowed for my father and I now to have a wonderful relationship, and my mother has grown tremendously. And as I told you, we both finished school at the same time. But the wheat and the tare. In these times, as I wrap up my message today on persistence to keep rising, it is important that you all know, young people and adults or elders, that both have to exist. You know, the wheat and the tare. The wheat is a piece of grain they pick that gives us bread and gives us one proportion of the fiber in which we live off of wheat. A lot of us consume bread. But then there are weeds and little bitty things growing amongst those fine wheats that they have to pick out, like the thorns when our ancestors or our people that came before us were picking cotton. You know, in the midst of our greatest times, there will always be troubling waters, always. Those troubling waters allow for us to know that there is a way to continue to navigate, because you will get your just due if you persist. The wheat and the tare are never separate. If you cut your grass, you couldn't pluck out one proportion of grain from another piece of grain unless you were just out there laying down to monitor every one of the grains in the grass, and you still couldn't get them all. So in Matthew, that parable offers me insight in which I leave with you all today. Check it out if you get a chance. 13th chapter, 24th through 30th verse. The wheat and the tare. In these critical times in our society, when politicians are iffy to some degree, and I admit I know that firsthand, I implore you to understand that that has to exist in order for you to have the proper discernment to reach your political leaders, to encourage them to come and speak at chapel, to have them at your churches and your community, to expect more and demand more out of them, and make certain that they carry out the task in which you have appointed them to do, because your vote allowed them that chance to serve. And as your leader, as a political leader in this community, my job would be forfeiting if I did not listen to you, to try to understand that in the midst of the pain, in the midst of the rain, there is always some sunshine. So you have to take them both with each other. That's one of the things that our ancestors left with us. That is how we carried over when they were auctioning off millions for $600, $200. Enslaved servants that persisted to keep rising, that prayed a prayer that allows for me to stand here today and you to sit in those seats. That persistence offers me this chance to give you a chance to visualize what the wheat and the tare really mean, what the good and the bad of life are really like, ladies and gentlemen. I never once thought, in the midst of not having anything, really, I thought as a kid that I could not make it. My mother never put that in my spirit. And for that, I went on to achieve countless things, but it wasn't about the achievement. As I look back on it all now, as I step away from this office and the honor to serve, I recognize that it was the good and the bad that continues to give me grace and mercy in this life that God has allowed me to live. And so, in closing, if you all continue to persist, because it is a must, you have to persist in order to keep rising, ladies and gentlemen. As your state representative, and hopefully Reverend Williams, you will have the others who come after me, my job's not done. My service is not over. It is my aim and intention as a servant leader to re-engage a scholarship foundation in which our family created in 2004. When I was elected to create less conflict and confusion, I dissolved it. But now, going back into the private sector, I aim to provide textbook scholarships. Not our scholarship foundation, our vehicle in which God has blessed us with. Provide textbook scholarships to students attending shorter college, financial literacy courses, oral hygiene awareness courses, making certain that our young kids have access to college preview tours, to spend a day in the life with people like you in these seats and students across campuses in the state, to know that that is possible for them. So ladies and gentlemen, once again, as I began, I ask that you take a look at all that you have around you, all the greatness in which Shorter is blossoming in these days. Understand that those are the greatest times. And we also have struggling times still. And those both have to exist in order for you all to persist. And if you persist, I guarantee you, in the name of our Creator, you will rise.